Do you want a quicker, easier way to enjoy Thanksgiving pie? It's these pecan pie bars. Same thing as a pie, but in bar form, easier to serve, easier to make, and just as delicious. Let's make some. If you don't want to make a pie, pecan pie bars are a great way to go. All the goodness, just a little bit easier. So we're gonna start with a crust, which we're gonna first bake and then add the filling. So some all-purpose flour, a little bit, just a small amount of sugar. Guess what? Pecan pie has a lot of sugar, so does pecan pie bars. So we don't need a ton in the crust, but enough to give it some flavor, make it golden, things like that. A little sprinkle of salt, just like right on top, that's, you know what we need to do. And we mix together the dry ingredients. Now, this is pretty simple. It's pretty much just like a short pastry, meaning we're gonna now add butter right into this. So I have it cubed up, cold butter, and you can see I'm just gonna toss it in, and then we'll just kind of start mixing it like we would any other pastry. And once all the butter's added, I just like to first toss it with the flour, kind of coat each piece. It just, to me, makes it easier, and it makes sure that not too big of ones are sticking together. And then we just start picking up like we would for a pie dough. Sometimes I'm worried when I say that. I'm worried people out there like watching are like, what do you mean? I don't make pie dough. Well, let me show you. It's pretty easy. It's the same process we're doing now. Once I have it tossed and coated, all these pieces, I just pick up piece by piece and push between my thumb and forefingers, kind of off into a big, flat, weird, irregular piece, and then just keep doing that until we're all evenly irregular. And then eventually what this does is it creates this coarse dough, shaggy dough that seems dry, but it holds together. We're gonna press that into the bottom of the pan. So we're gonna keep doing this until we get to that point, and then we'll bake it. So once you have it, I mix this slightly more than I would a pie dough, meaning you can see it's kind of wet. It's a little bit more of a ratio of butter to the mixture too. But when you make a fist, look how it holds together nicely. That means we can start pressing it into our pan. So I have a shallow 9x13 here, which is just a quarter sheet pan size, by the way. And I have it fitted with some parchment paper. That's just gonna make it a little bit easier to take these out. And I'm just going to, right down here in the center, put all of that beautiful crust, which is gonna be buttery and delicious. So like, unlike a pie where you have to make your, your dough and you have to chill it, you have to roll it, we're making a pressing crust. The filling's pretty much the same. Everyone that tastes these are like, well, I love this. So you're like, no problems with that. So I'm spreading it out just slightly, and now what I wanna do is just start pressing it. See how when I press it, it actually forms a crust? Now, if you don't wanna do it with your hand, I do have here too a big, just flat bottom measuring cup. You can take this if you want. It kind of helps you evenly just have a nice, see how it flattens it and makes a nice crust that you can kind of pound in. So it's really whatever works for you, but I'm gonna continue to do this until it's all flat, and we're gonna pop it in the oven. So you can see it's just pretty much pressed in, not perfect. And I don't make a crust around the edges. I don't mind that it has a little bit of a lip, but it doesn't have to go up the sides like a pie would say. So now we're just gonna put this right into the oven. We're gonna let it pre-bake, because if you didn't do this, you'd have a soggy crust when it had the filling on top, as opposed to a nice crisp baked crust. So while that's baking, we can start getting ready our filling, which is pretty much the same as any other pecan pie. And it's gonna start with eggs. We need eggs. So what eggs do are what they always would do, is bind everything together, help it create almost not a custard type center, but that beautiful gooey center we're used to in a pecan pie. Now, we always have pecan pie at any Thanksgiving meal. And even now, when my family doesn't always need multiple pies, I make multiple pies so everyone can have the piece they want. My mom will always have a little bit of both. But guess what? She loves this just as much as she would an actual pie. Even though they're bars, I think they're easier actually to serve. I think they're easier to cut, and they're easier to make ahead. And you just don't have to worry about anything else. Now, the one difference here is there's a lot of sugar. That's not the difference. That's kind of just normal. You know what am I doing? I'm talking and forgetting what we're doing. So first what I wanna do is I wanna whisk this up. I just feel like you guys are in my kitchen, we're having fun. Instead, what we're gonna do though is whisk up the eggs just to make sure they're combined. It's just easier to do that now. And just once you have them roughly whisked, notice I'm using the same bowl that we made the crust in. I'm not gonna do multiple bowls, no. We're gonna put in brown sugar. Now, brown sugar has what? Those deeper notes, has a little bit more flavor, more caramelly note quality. So we're putting that in there. Now, instead of corn syrup, we're doing maple syrup. Now, the one thing I like about maple is it has some flavor it adds, but not to the point where it overpowers. But it doesn't have, sometimes corn syrup, it's classic for some people in a pecan pie, but it has a gooiness that doesn't seem right. maple syrup makes the really just like perfect consistency, I think. And then what we're gonna do is a little bit of flour. Now this is just a small amount. I'm getting so excited. I'm getting messes everywhere. Small amount of flour. And what that does is it binds this enough to be a bar that we can cut, but it doesn't make it so thick that it's just like pasty. So it's just like the right mix. And then some vanilla. You know, it's a baked good. It's gonna be vanilla. And I think it really does balance out. You know, there's not a lot of flavor in pecan pie other than pecans. There's just a lot of sweet. The maple adds a little bit, but you want some vanilla to really bring that together. A little bit of salt. So we're gonna put that in there, and now we're gonna whisk everything up. Then we're gonna chop the pecans so they more evenly go into it. So you can see once you have it whisked, it looks like pecan pie. It's, you know, but you know what? I do smell it, and I think already you get a little bit of the note of the maple, which if you're saying, I don't like maple, don't worry, it's not gonna be overpowering, but it really is a nice addition, and it's a good way to kind of offset not using corn syrup and getting a slightly better consistency, I think. So on pies, some people are really into making sure they have whole pecan halves on top, concentric circles, whatever it is. On these bars, it's much easier to chop them. So I'm gonna take all my pecans here, and I'm just gonna start chopping them. I like to do it by hand. You could do it, you know, in a machine if you wanted to. You could do it in a food processor. I just like to kind of irregularly rough chop them. And then what's nice about once they're chopped, when they're mixed in and then they bake, they come up and they form a nice even layer. And it's a lot, since this is a more shallow type bar as opposed to a pie, it helps them more be even across it. You know, in a pie, they have a lot more room for the pecan halves to work to the top, to be more even, things like that. The bars, I just like chopping them. And again, the bars should be a time saver, and that's what we're doing here too. We're chopping them. You don't have to lay them on perfectly on top. Just chop them up irregularly, throw them in. We're gonna make pretty much a pie, but easier. So once you have them all imperfectly chopped, you know, this is all about imperfect. You know, if you're not used to baking, make these, they're easy. We're gonna throw them right into the filling. And you can see what I like about this is, as opposed to when you use a food processor, sometimes you get almost a powdery-like flour out of a nut. This gives you a little bit more of a nice, just sized one of the pieces. So I'm mixing those in. It's all combined. That's our filling. Now we're just gonna wait for the crust to finish baking, to have a nice pre-bake on it. We're gonna pour this on, bake it again. We're gonna have pecan pie bars. See, Thanksgiving can be easy and no stress. Just took the crust out of the oven. Our filling is made. Now, in a normal time, when maybe it's not Thanksgiving, we're stressed, we get everything done, but you know what you guys didn't remind me of? Do you see something sitting on my stove? Yeah, that's the melted butter that goes into this filling. You know, sometimes this is to show you that it doesn't have to be at the perfect right times, but the recipe will still work. So I'm gonna put the melted butter into the filling. It adds richness. Guess what it also adds? It makes it, to me, a really good consistency for cutting and slicing. So we're gonna stir that in, whether it's now or correctly a little bit before this, it doesn't matter. So once that's stored in, we can store it in. Once it's put in, we can put it right on top of this crust. And so the crust is still warm, that's okay. But what I do wanna do is just as I'm pouring it, make sure some of those nuts are gonna get all the way out. They should, but you know, sometimes I just like to give them some help and then get all of that goodness out of there. Now, this is a full pan and now it's gonna bake, but it bakes a little bit quicker than a pie too, which is nice because it's shallow. You don't have that thick whole filling of a pie. Instead, you have a nice kind of shallow crust. Look how pretty that is. I mean, half of the battle's already won. So I'm gonna put this back into the oven, and just like on a pecan pie, I like it to slightly jiggle in the center, and then we'll pull it back out. We'll let it cool, and we'll have pecan pie bars. Once the pecan pie bars are finished baking, you take them out and you let them cool. And I mean cool completely, because just like any pie, if you would cut them when they're warm or hot, it would just, the filling would go everywhere. It wouldn't be a pretty thing. Once they're cooled, you need to make sure you just separate them from the sides that don't have parchment, or sometimes even from the side that does really well. And then they should more easily lift out, which on camera, you always have to say a prayer and just hope they do, and they did. And look how pretty they are. So this is really now up to you if you want to just eat the whole thing yourself. You may not feel the best. Or you can cut them any size you want. So when we cut, what I like though is that chopped pecan. Do you see how that just cuts, I think personally, a little bit easier than it would if it was just in whole pieces or whole halves. So then you have this wonderful slice. And what to me is super important with this slice is look at the filling. I'm just gonna get down here and so I can talk about this because I think this is important. This filling you can see is still soft. It's not so baked that it's just this one gluey solid mess. That wouldn't be good. So pecan pie bars, when you take it out of the oven, you want it to jiggle. Sometimes I will even check it with the temperature of internal thermometer and put a little instant read thermometer in there, 185 degrees. That's what you want the center. It will jiggle and you'll think that's not gonna be done. If it's 185 degrees, take it out, let it cool completely, and you will have the perfect filling. So ice cream on top, that's probably a must. I think pumpkin pie is whipped cream, pecan ice cream. Okay, this is one where I wanna end it now, but because I just wanna finish it. The maple makes it super delicious. I'm not tasting maple, but I'm getting like a more flavorful sweetness than I usually would. The vanilla comes through. Wow, that maple just really enhances it, which I love every time. I feel like this is a slight surprise, and once you do this, I think you're gonna do it in all your pies too. Also, what I love is that filling is not so thick that it's overwhelming. That's what's kind of nice about this bar. It's pie, but a little bit less portioned, so you're not having this huge piece of pie. Not that that's ever really a problem for anyone. But it just kind of seems right. Big dollop of ice cream maybe, and you're set to go. So what do I hope you gain from this? That there are shortcuts. There are easier ways to have Thanksgiving and not stress about it. If you don't feel comfortable making a pie, making crust, whatever it is, don't do it. Make the bars, make it easier on yourself. Do things that work for you and have fun. That's the whole point. So share this video around, not just to help me, which it does, but to help everyone see that Thanksgiving can be done whatever way works for you. It's more about coming together, having your loved ones close by, enjoying the day, and being stress-free. That's when everyone's gonna have a good time. So check my website, wiseguy.com, for this recipe. All my other recipes on there is Thanksgiving Central, just for you, year-round if you want it to be. Until then, enjoy something delicious. That's the point.